Hi, welcome to an evening with Tulstin Troubadours. Throughout the course of the evening, we'll be playing 12th and 13th century music for you on various instrumentation. This first song that we'll be playing is called Kalinda Maya. It's a 12th century tune. Next up, we're going to be playing one of over 400 cantigas de Santa Maria, which were either written or collected by King Alfonso the Wise, who I believe was King Richard the Lionheart's great nephew, around the year 1250. This one is number 353, Quien a Imagem da Virgem.
nice thing about cantigas is there are so many to choose from. And the next one is one of our favorites. Number 166, Como Podem. And the next song is After We All Stand Up. And now I get to take these off.
Up next, we have two songs. One, the first one, by Blondel, who, legend has it, was King Richard the Lionheart's favorite minstrel. He wrote this song, the legend says, and went out to search for where Richard was imprisoned. He whistled the first part of the song, and when he heard the second part of the song being whistled back to him, he then knew where Richard was being held and was able to go seek help to procure his release. The second song is actually by King Richard the Lionheart, written while he was in prison. And the lyrics translate something to, though I am in prison, with a little effort and help from my friends and barons, I can still sing a song.
Nobody knows the trouble I've seen.
Tee-hee.
And thank you so much for joining us for this evening with Life is a Faire. And we hope to see you again
Wait.
very soon.
Hold on. We have stuff.
We
What
do
if
have
they
stuff.
liked us?
What if they liked us?
If you liked us, we have a tip basket in the form of Patreon or Venmo, which should be in the description below,
Or PayPal.
or PayPal.
And if you loved us, we have CDs.
Ooh.
Oh, this is why I'm not a juggler. CDs. And if you hated us, we have CDs and you have enemies.
You know it's true. Thank you once again. Hope to see you once again on Life is a Faire. Please stay tuned for future episodes. Thank you again. And one more time do that, and then we'll do the silly one.
You want to do the silly one
Let's
now?
do the
or-
silly one. Yeah, let's do the
Okay,
silly one.
all right.
All right. Thank you so very much for joining us. This evening would not have been the same without you. But before we go, we do have some reminders.
If you liked us, we have a tip jar in the form of Venmo and PayPal. If you really liked us, we have ongoing support available through Patreon. You can be our patron of the arts. And if you loved us, we have CDs. Ooh. Click on the link on our website for that information to purchase. If you hated us, we're the Brobdingnagian Bards.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us. And please stay tuned for future episodes on Life is a Faire. Thank you and good evening.
Hi, I'm Sarah Marie Mullen, and I play the Celtic harp at Renaissance festivals all over the country. You may have seen me most recently at the Arizona, Carolina, and Scarborough Renaissance festivals. Today, I'd like to play some of the music of Ireland for you, starting out with one of my favorite Irish legends. This is the story of Dagda and the three strains of Irish music. Now, Dagda is a pre-Christian Irish deity. He has many treasures. He has a sword that can never fail him in battle. He has a cauldron that can bring his fallen soldiers back to life. But his greatest prize is his harp, Wetna, which has the power to move men's souls. Now, Dagda's sometime consort in these stories is a river goddess named Buan, from whom the river Boyne derives its name. And at the beginning of this tale, Buan is pregnant with triplets. When it comes time for her to deliver her children, Dagda dutifully sits by her side and plays for her. The first birth is very difficult, and Buan cries out in pain as her first child is born. And so Dagda names this child, and the music he is playing, Goltree. This is the music of sorrow. The second is easier. Juan laughs as her second son is born, and so Dagda names this child Gansri. This is the music of joy. Juan is exhausted by the time her third child comes. She falls asleep. And so Dagda names this child and the music he is playing Suantri. And this is the music of rest. Dagda also has formidable enemies, a tribe called the Fomorians. And at one point, a band of Fomorians managed to steal his harp, Huetna, and they bring it back to their own feasting hall, where they discover they can't play it because Dagda's harp will play only for its master's hand. But they hang it on the far wall of their hall and they begin to celebrate. Now, Dagda, finding his harp missing, quickly deduces who's got it, and that night he sneaks into the Fomorian hall. He sees his harp hanging on that far wall, and so he calls to it, and his harp flies into its master's hands, killing a number of Fomorian warriors as it traverses the hall. So now Dagda does have his harp back, but he is standing in the middle of the feasting hall of his bitter enemies who have just watched many of their comrades being bludgeoned to death by a magical flying harp. This is perhaps not an ideal situation, but Dagda thinks quickly, and he begins to play. First he plays Goltri, the music of sorrow, and the Fomorians find that their thoughts are overwhelmed with memories of lost loves and absent friends. They begin to weep as Dagda plays. Dagda hasn't escaped yet, but quickly he begins to play again, and next he plays Gansri, the music of joy. The Fomorians forget their cares and their sorrows, they begin to sing and dance and spin about the hall, and Dagda creeps just a little bit closer to his escape as he plays this next tune. Now he hasn't escaped yet, but he begins to play one final tune. He plays Suantri, the music of rest. And now the Fomorians find that their limbs have grown heavy. They can barely keep their eyes open. And slowly they sink to the floor of the hall and begin to sleep. And finally, Dagda can escape with his harp as he plays this tune. So that is the story of how the three strains of Irish music came to be. And from that point on, no bard of Ireland is considered truly accomplished until they've mastered all three strains of music. Now let's move from Irish legend to Irish history. This next tune is about a very colorful woman from Irish history, one of my favorites, Grania or Grace O'Malley. Now, Grania O'Malley is born in the first half of the 16th century. Her father is chieftain of the O'Malleys, and that makes him a very powerful person in Ireland at that time. He also has a fleet of ships, and he's in trade. When Grania is a young woman, she asks if she can go to sea with her father, but he tells her no, women can't be aboard the ships because their long hair would get tangled up and in the way. Well, Grania comes back the next day with all of her hair cut off. Her father is forced to allow her to come to sea with him. Eventually, she becomes a very capable seawoman and follows in her father's footsteps as the chieftain of the O'Malleys. So she rules a large portion of Connaught for the latter half of the 16th century. She has a string of castles along the coast, and she, of course, has that fleet of ships, which she uses both for trade and to levy taxes on vessels in her territorial waters, which, of course, a great many people consider to be an act of piracy. In fact, the English called her the Irish Pirate Queen. But she had a different nickname among her own countrymen, harkening back to her early years. They called her Granuaile, and that's the title of this next tune. It translates as Grace the Bald. That melody was probably written not terribly long after Grania died in 1603. Now, the beginning of the 17th century marks a pretty steep decline in fortunes for the old Irish families. It's a rough time in Irish history, which isn't to say that the previous few hundred years were great. They're all rough times in Irish history. It's pretty much just centuries of war. But in the beginning of the 17th century, we have the end of the 9 Years' War. And that marks the decline of the old Irish clans and their authority in Ireland. And that sets the stage for our next tune, which was written by a harper named Rory O'Cahan. So Rory O'Cahan is born during the 16th century, sometime mid to late 16th century, and he is a member of the Cahan family, which is a very powerful family at that time, and he's born blind, but he's still a member of Irish nobility. He is taught to play the harp, because that is a traditional occupation for the blind. Now, his family ends up going into exile. So after the 9 Years' War, King James, who's the new king, offers peace terms, and some of the families accept them. Some of them decide that they just don't want to live with diminished lands and wealth, and they go abroad. Rory O'Cahan's family is one of these. And that is perhaps why he ends up spending most of his adult life in Scotland, touring and performing with his harp. Now, at some point in the early 17th century, he visits the home of a Lady Eglinton. Lady Eglinton is unaware of his rank and his background. And so she simply commands him to play her a tune. Well, he's insulted at being addressed as if he's a servant, and so he leaves. Of course, Lady Eglinton inquires as to why he left so abruptly, and she's informed of his family, and so she's embarrassed by this breach of etiquette. She sends a note of apology over to him, and he comes back sometime later and presents her with this melody in honor of their reconciliation. It's his most famous tune. It's called Give Me Your Hand. Now, it's been often noted that there are a handful of topics that show up over and over again, not just in the music of Ireland, but in Celtic music as a whole. So things like, the English have stolen all of my cows, or fucking fairies. But most prominent, I would say, the classic is the melancholy love song, right? Those come up all the time. In this next melody, it perfectly encapsulates that entire genre of Irish music in its title alone. This melody was written in the mid-17th century by a harper named William Connellan. William and Thomas Connellan were brothers who both played the harp in Ireland and I think also in Scotland at that time. The tune is Love's a Tormenting Pain. The music of Rory O'Cahan, William and Thomas Connellan have a great effect on this next harper, Turlough O'Carolan. Carolan is by far the most famous of the Irish bards. He's born in 1670. His family are employed by the McDermott Rowe family, and Mrs. McDermott Rowe is paying for young Turlough to go to school, but unfortunately, sometime in his teens, he contracts smallpox, and while he survives the disease, he does lose his sight to it. And so his patron pays for him to have lessons at the harp, and when he comes of age, she buys him a harp and a horse and employs a guide for him, and he begins to make his way in the world as an itinerant musician. He travels all over Ireland, visiting and performing for the landed gentry, and in exchange for the hospitality and the support of his hosts, he composes tunes in their honor. These are his planksties. It's a term he may have coined that could be roughly interpreted as thank you to or tribute to. He wrote 176 planksties for his various patrons. He was quite prolific. I'm going to play you, I think actually it might be the very first O'Carolan tune I ever learned. This one is Planksty Burke, which I've been playing for, I think 29 years now, but I still really love this one. This next tune is another one of Carolan's planksties. Now, it comes a little bit later in his life. Carolan has been suffering from poor health for some time, and so he goes to a doctor. The doctor tells him, if you expect to recover, you must stop drinking. Well, Turlough O'Carolan is almost as famous for his drinking as he is for his music, but he does as the doctor orders. This doesn't make him feel better. In fact, he feels a great deal worse, and so he does what many of us would do upon receiving unwelcome medical news. He seeks out a second opinion. This time he goes to Dr. John Strafford. Strafford listens to Carolan's complaints and says, I don't know, I think you should start drinking again. Well, Carolan is so very grateful to the good doctor for that prescription that he writes him a tune in thanks. So this is Planksty John Strafford, but over the years it's become much better known by an alternate title, Carolan's Receipt for Whiskey. sense of how happy Carolyn was when he wrote that particular melody. Not all of Carolyn's tunes are Planksty, though the vast majority are. He did write a handful of tunes for other occasions, including laments, which are, of course, written on the occasion of someone's death. My favorite of these is the Lament for Charles McCabe. I think it is the most beautiful of Carolyn's laments. It's a little bit odd. You see, McCabe was a dear friend of Carolyn's. They were so close, in fact, that McCabe wrote and delivered Carolyn's eulogy. Some of you may have noticed a logical flaw here. Clearly, McCabe has to have outlived Carolyn to have done so. So how does it come to be that there is a lament for Charles McCabe? Well, it starts out, as many stories about Carolyn's life do, in a pub. Carolyn and McCabe get into a drinking contest. The loser has to pay the bar tab. Well, McCabe passes out at the bar. Carolyn is afraid that his friend will deny the whole thing in the morning, and so he has him tied up in a sack and left there till the morning. Not a very nice thing to do to your friend. But McCabe does get his revenge a little while later, because at some point he knows when Carolyn is expected to return towards home after a period of travel, and so he goes out, he meets Carolyn on the road, he pitches his voice differently, and introduces himself as a stranger. Carolyn asks the stranger for news from home, and he's told, it's quite tragic actually, Charles McCabe has suddenly died. Well, Carolyn's heartbroken to hear about the death of his dear friend, but he believes the stranger and he asks to be brought to the churchyard. So McCabe takes this one step further and he brings his friend to the churchyard, sits him down in a fresh grave. Carolyn can't read the tombstone, of course, and so he sits there, he weeps, and he writes his most heartfelt lament for his dearly departed friend, who is right there next to him the entire time listening to the whole thing. I think that's around what I have time for today, but I would like to finish the show with one of my own compositions. This is a melody I wrote originally as a harp, violin, cello trio piece. Obviously, it's missing a couple of its parts when I play it for you here, but you can hear the full version of it on my album, Harper's Bazaar. Yeah, the other tunes I've been playing today are mostly on my Irish album, We Brought the Summer With Us, although I think a few of them are on some of my earlier recordings. You can find all 5 of my albums in CD and, of course, also in download format on my website. I do have a Patreon page, which features not just my music, but also my husband's. He is also a musician. And we will be putting out music there every month. So there's all sorts of fun stuff if you'd like to check that out. And of course, I'm also happy if you choose to tip me. If you've enjoyed this show, gratefully accept tips. So this is the Carousel Waltz. I want to say thank you so much to Andrew for putting this together, and a huge thanks to my husband, Cyrus Rua, who not only set up all of this gear, because I honestly am not the most tech savvy and have no idea how to do most of this stuff. He is also taking care of our 2 daughters and keeping them quiet, so I don't think you've heard too much thump, 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 thump on the ceiling above me. And you've been able to hear my show without the screaming of a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old in the room. So thank you for joining me in my living room deep in the woods of Bastrop, Texas. I hope wherever you are happy, healthy, and safe, and that sometime in the not too distant future, I can play for you all again at a festival or a concert. I miss playing for a live audience. This is a little weird, playing in my living room here, but I hope you've enjoyed the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. Bye.